ourselves as a singular person. When you say, who are you, who am I, you think of yourself as one creature, as one entity. But in reality, we are but one part of this giant piece of mud and meat that I call Whoville. We have countless units of consciousness inside of our bodies, all working together to keep us alive and to keep us fully functioning in the world. And the interesting thing about these units of consciousness is that the more of them there are, the smaller their capacity for knowledge is. So atoms have very little knowledge of the world. I've got a lot of knowledge because of all of my organ systems that can take in knowledge. My skin cell has a little less knowledge, but it knows the temperature. It knows certain things. It knows how to hold on and become skin. So today I'm going to explain to you how we can have a conscious universe and actually think of every part of our body as alive, not just this really small part that I call me. So my name, thank you very much, is Dr. Cyd Ropp, and today I'm going to share a simple fractal model of the conscious universe, or myself, the governor of Whoville. And this is but one part of my book, which is a simple explanation of absolutely everything, which is available at all online booksellers. So let me begin with the basic assumption that life begins with consciousness, not with matter. Most scientists believe that consciousness is just a byproduct. They call it an artifact of our brain, as if we are not conscious, as if we are just meat. But I'm saying everything begins with consciousness. The air around us is essentially conscious. So looking at the chart here, consciousness is the ground state that underlies everything. Whether or not anything's there, there is thoughtlessness, but it's conscious. When you come up to having information within consciousness, that's called a thought. And the basic thought of the universe is physics, is math, is the organization of the way this universe runs. That is the thought of this universe. You could think of it as a thought of God if you wanted to call it God. So consciousness is the first thing that happens. Then comes your subatomic particles, your quantum foam, that are bubbling up out of the organizational potential of the universe. The subatomic particles reach out and they hold hands with each other and they become atoms. That's one way of putting it, right? Atoms, what do? They reach out to other atoms and they hold hands and they become molecules, right? What do molecules do? Don't they reach out to other molecules like themselves and hold hands and become elements? And then at this point, things become free-floating. We've got the Big Bang, all of these little guys holding hands, floating out through the universe. They become elements. They become minerals. And at this point, we pass now from mud, what I call mud, into meat. Even most ancient religions, even those that tend to think of the universe as imbued with consciousness, such as Buddhism, they tend to think that humans are special and different and that like we're the only conscious thing out there. But I think it's all consciousness, all the way up through the minerals, up now into our living parts. I think every organelle, which is the small parts that make up cells, every cell, every organ system is an entity. You could give them names. I mean, brain is almost as smart and powerful as I am, really. Brain's right there. Brain thinks it's in charge, doesn't it? Or maybe your sexual organs think they're in charge. They're certainly entities, aren't they? If you've got an eating disorder, your will cannot compete with the needs of the digestive system. These systems have wills of their own. They push their needs and desires through. That's what I call the meat. So you've got your mud and you've got your meat. I'm just one small part at the very top, and I believe that what I am is governor of Meat Mountain, or Whoville. And as the governor, it is my job to be wise and responsible to this constellation of entities that comprise me. It's as if I am a whole universe, and all of these parts within me, we're just like that to our universe. It's kind of a fractal level down. Do you know that you have as many molecules and cells in your body as there are stars in the entire universe? So this portion that if the whole universe thinks of as God, in like analogy to us, who's the God of your Whoville? Who is the God of Meat Mountain? Is it your higher self? this consciousness that is a fractal chip off of the universal consciousness, what some might call God? Or is it your organ systems? I think people with addictions, one of their organ systems is in charge of Meat Mountain. They're out to lunch. Is it your ego? What is ego? Ego is not who I am. You've heard the difference between ego and self. Have you ever heard this discussion that yourself might be thought of as the higher consciousness, the consciousness that is perhaps a fractal replicant of the mind of God, or the universal unit of consciousness, if the whole universe is conscious? Ego is just the mindset of Meat Mountain. Ego is the byproduct of this. Ego's from about here down. Ego's in charge of the meat. Ego's in charge of getting mine. I want what's mine. You have offended me. I'm hurt. Ego's in charge of emotions. Ego's in charge of drive and selfishness and all these various things that people say, oh, they're so egoic. We're trying to rise above ego. What does that mean? It means don't let your meat be in charge of you. Here, this is your upper... In Maslow's hierarchy of needs, he called this the actualized self. You could call it that. It's this little tiny piece of you that when you meditate, when you pray, when you become centered, it is the self, like this, riding up on top of your Meat Mountain that's in charge. And it's the self that centers and is able to contact God through meditation, centeredness, prayer, emptiness, however you contact the higher onward and upward force. This is the way to get to it. You can't get through it down here. This is all self-centered and contained within my skin. But myself plugs right into the universal unit of consciousness. So I am much more than the aggregate of all of my molecules and the aggregate of all of my meat. I am that plus this little fractal chip of the universal unit of consciousness that some people call God. Some people call it the absolute. Some people call it the Param Brahma. Whatever you want to call it in whatever your religious tradition, it's the same little chip. Maslow called it the self-actualized self. It's that same little piece. And this is what we're actually working with when we're aspiring to do better. Now let me say something else about society. How is it that I can make this plain? Maybe you can see how intuitive this is. Everything reaches out and holds hands with others like itself. The atoms reach out and become molecules. The molecules reach out and become elements. My cells, my skin cells are all holding hands with the intent of making my skin organ. My skin has a consciousness. It's my skin. And it's holding hands to make my skin. If my cells decided to not hold hands and work towards the middle anymore, I would die. I would fall apart. And indeed, what is death? Death is generally when the self departs from this organization. Death is the moment when the self jumps out of the meat, and that leaves you, or part of it, let's say you're brain dead, the brain jumps out, everything's still working, but the brain has checked out, but you're still alive. You really die in pieces. You die back from the self, down through the organ systems, all the way down. And ashes to ashes, dust to dust, when all the life has left the meat, you still have the mud. And this is what is eternal in a sense, because this is the stardust down here. But also this is eternal, because it's a fractal replicant of consciousness. Let me explain one more thing before we finish. What is a fractal? Maybe I should say that. Where's my... Oh, edit this part out. Where's my flower? Here we are. Okay. This is a fractal. Do you see what a fractal is? It's a self-replicating system that is exactly the same, more or less, not exactly, okay, more or less the same, bigger and bigger and bigger, smaller and smaller and smaller. It's expressed by a formula. Believe it or not, there's a formula for this little flower bud, this piece of yarrow. Okay, so you see this. This was one flower bud off of a big bush that I picked. One, right? Now, look. There's another bouquet that I take off the bouquet. Oh, here's another bouquet that I took off the bouquet. Oh, here's another bouquet that I just took off of this bouquet. Look, there's another bouquet. And I get all the way down to the little flowers, and each one of them has the petals. Each one of them is the essential. So imagine if there's a formula to express all these divisions that I just went down. This formula could go up all the way up. It could go all the way down, and that's what a fractal is. it repeats itself, pattern, bouquet after bouquet after bouquet, bigger and bigger, bigger, smaller and smaller and smaller. And I'm suggesting that every aspect, every size, from the subatomic quantum foam all the way up through self, all the way up through the universal unit of consciousness that keeps track of all the knowledge in our universe, well, this could be the universal unit of consciousness. And, here's our galaxy, and here's our solar system, and here's the Earth, and here's the United States, and, and here's Ashland. And here we are in the SOU library. And that's what it means to be fractally nested. And consciousness is exactly the same way, just like this block. All right, that's all I have for you today. Do you kind of understand what I mean? Okay. Do you have any questions? Yes, go ahead. No, okay. Yes.
This is fascinating. I've never heard it put in these terms. What I have, terms I have put it in was Abraham, Seth, entities that speak through what we now call channels. How do you?
Where are they in this model?
Yeah.
Well, okay.
And informing your thoughts or informing your religious or spiritual beliefs.
I think that part of the self-replicating universe is reincarnation. Okay, is that everything comes back. Things keep cycling around and around and around. So this self of mine, Cyd, will die, but I have a set of beliefs. It's knowledge. It's a knowledge-driven universe. So there's a set of beliefs that was attached to Cyd that is floating out here in the ether, in the transpersonal consciousness. You know that, like, I'm thinking that our thoughts are not really in our head. They're thinking that they're going to do enough brain slides and look at our neurology close enough that they're going to find how we think. Our thoughts are not in our heads. Our heads are like radio tuners. The thoughts are in the transpersonal space between us. And if my tuner is tuned into the same place your tuner is, we'll have the same thoughts. And so I think that Seth and these guys live in the transpersonal consciousness, and that the people that believe in that have a tuner that can pick it up. You see what I'm saying?
I do. In fact, the radio analogy tuner has been used in that.
Okay, and so it's like that. There's more to my theory. This is just the fractal consciousness aspect, but there's a whole part of the theory that's a simple explanation of a meme-driven culture. And memes are what we believe in, the things we believe in, the things we love, and the things we hate. They're like bundles. You know that tarot card where the person's weighed down with the sticks on the back? Our beliefs are like this big sack of sticks that we carry around. And so we believe in these memes, and then when you die, your consciousness has to let them go, and they're out there floating. But you have created actions that will have consequences. That's also called karma. So actions have consequences, and part of that is that when this particular aggregation that suits you comes back around, you're going to be sitting back there again, and probably those memes are going to reattach. It's kind of the continuity of personality, but it's not as if your personality stays intact from life to life. You sort of dissolve into the absolute and reform because your belief system's sitting there. I clearly have such a strong belief system that, probably fairly soon after my body disintegrates, the next body is going to come into being, and that belief system will want to stick to somebody. And whoever's suited to me, it's going to be where it sticks, and then I'm going to think I'm that person. See, it's like that. You see what I mean?
I do. I have to.
You have to think about it, I know. All right, well, that's the official end of this portion of my talk, but I could go on. There's other things, but that's a whole different topic. But it's kind of along the lines of what you're asking about.
So how about your understanding or thoughts on, since thoughts are things, they're not even contained here,
right.
People creating their own reality by directing their thoughts into the reality they want to create. Really,
yes,
thoughts,
I understand.
Physics.
Right. Well, here's the thing. You have your will, and you've got your personal karma, but you're also into society, and there's a societal karma near you. So it may not be your intent for this or that to happen to you, and it might not even necessarily be your personal karma, but it might be. It might be just that you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, or the right place at the right time. But taking a look at this chart, okay, it's this flow, it's this dynamic flow. So here we have the creation of time and space. When I think about the future, I've got unlimited possibilities, right? It's kind of like this. It's kind of like the top of this V, right? 5 years from now, why, there's any of a million things I could be doing. But as the time gets closer and closer and closer, it constrains until it becomes a singularity at the middle of here and now, right? Right here, this is here and now. It's flowing down, there's the here and now. And that's when you make your decision. You can only make one decision at a time, and you only live here and now, one moment at a time, right? And decisions are only made here and now. They can't be made in the future, they can't be made then, they can't be made in the past. That's history. So, potential comes down, it collapses in the mathematical sense right at this 0-point field, which is at the center of our universe, so to speak, although it's non-localized. And it comes out into time and space. Here's your decision, and coming down past that is history. A million potentials, one decision, and there's one course, and that's what forms time. That is what history is. Potential, collapse, decision, now it's history. You see what I'm saying? Now karma is that history wrapping back around the outside and coming up to be one of the next things coming in. But it's not the only thing. There's also all this other stuff. The economy and everybody else and the car and all that business. So my karma goes down, wraps around, and because just one of these things informing the next here and now decision. So
I saw this same diagram on Thrive video.
Right.
Familiar.
I saw the movie as well. After I published my book, people said, "You've got to see that movie called Thrive," and so I watched it. So this isn't derivative from it. We have independently arrived at the same theory.
See that.
And I actually think, and what Thrive is suggesting, is that beneath the nuclear reaction, they're talking about free energy. You know, the most powerful energy we can get now is nuclear reactions, right? The nuclear reactions. There's a fractal level down below nuclear. That's this subatomic. Yeah. And down here, your little quantum clouds, there it is. That's the Thrive torus. And the Thrive is suggesting that this is going to be the source of free energy, and I think that's true. I think we're going to crack the torus that's just underneath the nuclear reactions. And that will be that much more powerful. It's a fractal level more powerful than nuclear fission. Yes. We have independently arrived at these conclusions.
Yes.
And which gives me great hope that it might actually be valid, since there's many people coming up with these same types of conclusions. Now, I didn't study people and go around and cobble together a theory. I started on page 1 and wrote this as a thought experiment from the Big Bang outward. And if you start from the Big Bang, essentially this is what you wind up with, believe it or not, because this is the shape of our universe. It's the shape of explosions. I'm saying there's a giant donut around the outside of our space, and that there's tiny little donuts down underneath everything else. And there's, you know, a donut associated with everything in the universe. You know, it's called the Van Allen belt, the donut around the Earth. We have those Kirlian photography, you know, those energy things.
Yes.
That's the donut shape. And they've taken, when they do quantum probability clouds, it turns out that those are pretty much all shaped like this as well. So I'm predicting, a scientific prediction is that the Higgs boson, when they're able to visualize it, it's going to look exactly like this. Because this is the prototypical shape of all matter and all energy. Everything arises from this shape. Even normal geometry, everything arises from this shape. So it's a really strange and interesting thing.
12, 15 years ago, 12, 13 years ago, a group of us was studying on the edge, living on the edge. And we were talking about stardust.
Mm-hmm.
Those are A, C, T, and G.
Right.
A
Oh,
is
right.
made out of
Right.
those elements, short letters.
Right,
A,
right.
C, G, and T.
Right. Exactly.
That means something or nothing.
That's all you remember? Is that meaningful?
Remember what those mean. A-C-T-A-T.
Well, yeah. So I'm saying that the DNA helix, that's one of your...
DNA.
See, there it is. There it is. There's your letters. There they are. There they are. There's your G, A, T, and C right there.
Everything in the helix.
Everything comes out of that shape.
That is
Everything comes out of that shape.
Even your flower, you know, I'm looking at flower going, oh, okay.
Oh, and fruit. Well, now you go back and try cutting fruit. I'm a bed and breakfast chef, and I cut a lot of fruit up. I slice apples, I slice them, and there are toruses inside every single piece of fruit. Take an apple, take anything. There is this shape inside. And here's the seeds, and here's that little area of denser meat around the seeds, like in a pear or an apple. Out here is the skin. Here's your apple core. This is the basic shape of nature. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Cyd.
All right.
I'm sorry, my friends from this morning